This place got a new face, killing Joe's face. Got a Joe thing, chilling in a new fade. Blue space in a new place, what did he say? He done tic-tac, feeling like a true play. Step back and I never say no. I was winning over there, now I'm spinning out of flow. Got a feeling in the air, but I'm feeling kinda low. Got a ceiling over here, and I think it's gonna blow. Hey, this place got a new face, killing Joe's face.
What is good, everybody? It is that time again for me to be rolling over chords. I don't know what I'm not even rolling over. It's not like I don't have chord management under here. I got my guitar cord and my earphone cord over here. I'll be playing with the guitar over here when I be making music and stuff. That's why I'm wearing my robe. I'm kind of chilly and I was making music and stuff. Yo! What you watching? What's going on, everybody? I'm Aquarian OG, and you should get to know me. Today, we're going to continue on looking on some video from Second Thought. They got some pretty interesting, compelling videos going on. And this one is on the problem with American education. Because as I'm looking through... move this closer. As I'm looking through other countries and stuff, let me switch this to my other screen. As I look at other countries and stuff, I see like the education ratings and all that stuff. So you come across other comparisons when you're looking for stuff that has to do with comparisons, because it's the way the internet works nowadays. It's nosy. So I came across some stuff that made me think, that problem with education, American education video might be a banger. So we're going to check it out. So if you haven't subscribed or got into conversations down below, because people have been saying some interesting stuff. Yo, there's a couple people that came with different points of views on the Canadian reports that was on there. Some compelling points of views. I gotta go back and check and see if I got any reply, because there was one that it was good. I was like, so if something had to happen the opposite, what do you think the outcome would have been? Asking stuff like that. I'm trying to learn. What is your point of view? What genuinely do you think? Like, I don't want it ain't no media type deal. I'm just like, subscribe. Went through all that. Bingity bingity bing. Oh, you know what? It's been this phone that's been going off. I thought it was my main one. It's my off one. I got one that I use for cameras too. Let me turn this off so it don't do like the other video did. Bling, 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 shut up! Let me hit this one too just to make sure. I know, give me an extra minute. I know. Some people don't like long intros, but sometimes I just can't help it. All right, let's go. The problem with American education. Probably gonna be a doozy. Almost did it again. All right. If you hear some singing, that's the wife doing her singing lessons. They're just tone practice. Nothing too serious. Let's go.
In the United States, we like to pride ourselves on being the best at things. We spend more money than any other nation on our military, healthcare, and education. Unfortunately, simply throwing money at things doesn't make you the best at them. Our military, despite having the budget of the next 10 biggest spenders combined, is tremendously wasteful and is constantly used as a destabilizing force in regions we wish to dominate or exploit. Our healthcare system, despite occupying the world's #1 spot for per capita expenditure, is routinely ranked the worst in the developed world in terms of access, efficiency, and effectiveness.
Yeah. We just had that video on that. If you haven't seen that video, it's a doozy. It's a doozy. I think it's maybe, 2-3 videos down? Yeah, like 2, 3 videos down.
While each of these topics deserves its own video, in this episode, we're going to focus on the US education system, why it's failing our students and teachers, and what we can do to fix it. Think back to your time in school. What do you remember? Early mornings, long, windowless hallways punctuated by locked doors, a strictly regimented schedule. Your school life was dictated by the authority of the teacher, who conditioned.
Except our doors weren't locked when I went to school. I was before the whole guns in school thing. We had guns in school, but there wasn't no shooters in school.
You with countless commands every day. Sit down. Open your textbook to page 10.
There were gangs. I mean, I wasn't carrying a gun in school. No.
Stop talking. Line up. You were punished for speaking to classmates, making a joke, or coming in a single minute late. You had to get permission to use the restroom. Class started with a bell and ended with a bell. There's another kind of institution that follows a similar structure. It shouldn't come as a surprise that in the US, many of the same architects who designed our prisons also designed our schools.
Well, that explains that.
For many of us, school is an unpleasant memory. Sure, most of us had fun with friends we made in class, but that fun was exclusively outside of school hours. Odds are the memory of your education itself is pretty negative. Besides the experience of attending American school, the outcomes the system produces are also less than stellar. Despite our cultural obsession with getting American students to perform well in standardized testing, our scores fall squarely in the middle of the pack compared to other industrialized nations. This single-mindedness also has a more critical consequence. By demanding our teachers simply prepare students for testing rather than fostering an actually effective learning environment, we end up with students who not only forget everything they crammed into their heads immediately after taking the test, but who also lack the skills required to learn effectively.
And media. Media is heavy in the schools. Teachers, man. Yeah, media gets into schools and they take a hold. Nowadays you got the metal detectors and the internet and phone access and applications and TikToks, and it's wild now. I don't know how people learn anything in school nowadays. Nowadays school is just kind of like a building. My youngest son doesn't go to school. We homeschool. Not we, but he lives with his mom. We elected to have him stay home and be homeschooled because he was already doing that. So it's like, why he went to public school and doesn't really need to go to public school because we got it hooked up right now. So yeah, public schools is I didn't know they was designed by the same damn people. It makes sense, though, because when you look at the structure and the color on the inside, man.
The students aren't the only ones suffering. The US has exceptionally high teacher turnover due to low pay and long hours, and compounding the problem, a teacher shortage. So, to sum up the problem, our students are unhappy, perform poorly, and don't gain the critical skills they need. And our teachers are unhappy, overworked, and we don't have enough of them to meet a growing need.
That's pretty much all of America now, though. There's jobs. Well, they claim there's a bunch of jobs and this and that, but it's businesses that's going to eventually fail because ain't nobody working there, and then they got the COVID hit. It's like, yeah, it's a nasty little jagged saw blade going around right now.
A country depends on its young people, those who will grow up and take the reins from the previous generations. So why are we failing them so badly? Before we get into some potential solutions, we need to understand the three main problems plaguing the American education system. These three problems are the system's outdatedness, its underfunding, and its privatization. The lack of funding and the rapid privatization of the education system go hand in hand. So let's start there. When you think of the average school, whether elementary, middle, or high school, you're generally thinking about a public institution. That is, a school that is federally funded and tasked with providing education to all people of the appropriate age in a given school district free of charge.
Now, in Pennsylvania, and I think it's the original 13, honestly. Now I don't think it's 13. I think it's a couple of the original 13 states are Commonwealth states. I think it's only a couple of them now. Pennsylvania, Yeah, I'm not sure who else is in there now. I'm gonna have to look that up myself.
Charge. Public schools have existed in the U.S. since before it officially became a country, but the
But where I was going was that is Commonwealth states actually take money made from alcohol sales and things like that and put it towards schools and infrastructure and roads and whatever, yada yada yada. That was the tail end of that. I kind of like dropped off.
first Board of Education was established in Massachusetts in the year 1837. The person spearheading the education initiative, Horace Mann, believed that public education was the best way to overcome poverty, bridge social gaps, and prepare
Check out
young
that
people to
haircut.
enter the workforce. The Federal Department of Education was established 30 years later,
Wow.
with the goal of standardizing and helping to implement education across the country. What may be surprising to some is that private schools actually predate public schools in the U.S. As early as the 1660s, individual teachers were offering their services to young people and adults as a way to supplement their income. This private schooling often took place in the evenings, and was less structured than typical day school. By the beginning of the American Revolution, private schools had become pretty well established and were favored by those who could afford their fees. Fast forward to more modern times, and, like with healthcare and infrastructure, we begin
Same
to
thing
see a
today.
problem with accelerating privatization. The practice of privatization is simple. It entails the handing off of once public responsibilities to privately owned companies. Since the 80s, there's been a consensus, a deeply flawed one, but a consensus nonetheless, that there's nothing the government can do that the private sector can't do better. The word better is doing some heavy lifting here. Private companies often get things done more quickly or with a greater profit, but what free market enthusiasts fail to realize is that the outcomes are incredibly damaging, as is the case with American healthcare, or extremely fragile, as evidenced
Man, healthcare got killed by privatization. It is devastatingly, man, it's crazy. Millions in Texas remain without power and heat. Oh yeah, that's because that was privatized. These politicians out here don't care. That's supposed to be money that goes to infrastructure. Well, it was. What's his name down in Texas went to Cancun on it.
evidenced by private infrastructure projects. Take the Texas power grid, for example. It's entirely deregulated. This allows them to cut costs and make a greater profit. It also sets them up for
Crazy.
disaster, as we saw with the
Yep.
recent winter storm that completely knocked out the state's power and left millions stranded in freezing conditions. Of course, a crisis like this is considered an acceptable risk when there's a nice profit to be had. This free market logic has slowly seeped into the realm of education. Over the past couple of decades, various federal initiatives have provided parents the option of using federal funds to send their children to private schools.
That's that capitalism trap. Capitalism is a wheel just turning, and the wheel just gets bigger and bigger. And the reason it gets bigger and bigger is because it eats more profit and profit. You know that movie The Blob? Something fall. You know that movie The Blob, where every time the blob would consume something, it would grow. It would get bigger and bigger. That's capitalism. That's a beast.
Whether by providing so-called school choice vouchers or allowing for the possibility of school transfers, where students can move from low-performing schools to higher-performing private schools. This has led to a number of problems. The most obvious is that by spending federal money to incentivize parents to enroll their children in private school, they've robbed public schools of badly needed funding. Why spend money to move kids around when you could simply fund the schools that are designed to be funded by that money? Because of this practice, public schools face a vicious cycle. There's not enough money to pay teachers, so teachers leave, which leads to more students in each class, which overwhelms the remaining teachers. There's not enough money for school supplies or even basic school maintenance, which leads to unsafe learning environments. These problems compound over time, which makes the schools perform worse, which then suggests to the federal government that they're doing the right thing by incentivizing the move to private schools. Okay, but if the private schools perform better
don't
and
even
the
add
average
up.
parent can afford them, why not just abandon public schools? There are a few reasons, some innate to how private schools operate and some based on the responsibility of the federal government. First and foremost, it has been long established that the state has a responsibility to provide access to free education to every student.
You would think. Now, in the whole schools thing, there's a hierarchy with that too, because you got the private schools. He's already established that. But then after that, you got the area schools. Is it a public school in the suburbs? Is it a public school in the inner city? Is it a public school close to the hood or AKA the ghetto? You know, things like that. is the school in a what we call a food drought? Because we have areas where there's no shopping centers for people that live in that community within square miles, which square miles would be like within square kilometers. Would there'd be nowhere to buy food? It's crazy. We call them food droughts.
This is non-negotiable, at least for now. If public schools didn't exist, there would be students who could not afford to go to private school. Since education is a right, this is unacceptable. So, for the time being, the federal government cannot reasonably get rid of public schools entirely. The other issues stem from the private schools themselves. By their very nature, private schools are not beholden to any kind of governance when it comes to what is taught within their walls. All they have to do is provide proof that their education meets basic educational standards. This has led to an upsurge in what can be considered reactionary, or as the schools prefer, traditional education. What this means in essence is that most private schools skew intensely religious, conservative, and insular. Their student body is overwhelmingly white, Christian, and wealthy. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with a parent wanting their child to get a religious education. But the problem is, in the US, Christianity has been co-opted by conservatism.
They say church and state is separate, but I would have to say that's a freaking myth. If you've been in the mix for a bit, you've seen church and state operate the same way. It's sad to say, but hey, capitalism, greed. When you're tax exempt, you got extra time.
Gone are the days when people understood Jesus to be a brown communist from the Middle East, who railed against the
Brown communist? A brown communist from the Middle East? Did he just describe him like that? Wow. Okay.
rich and preached inclusion, decency, and the value of living humbly. Most American Christians have grafted the language of conservatism onto their faith. Homophobia, racism, unfettered free market economics, and a rabid hatred for anything that could be considered even remotely socialist. This is not by accident. The political right has adopted religious, patriotic language in an attempt to secure a large and dedicated voting bloc, evangelicals, and it's worked.
Could I just say, I didn't vote for him either. I knew he was capable of doing things like that. I ain't mad at him. He went in there and did exactly what I expected him to do. He ain't no politician, he's a businessman. He went in there and did business things. He don't play politician rules, so they couldn't control him. I mean, he's got some marks against him. But, he didn't really surprise me much. I'm glad it's quieter now. Shay. Damn, oh my God. I got tired of hearing, oh my God. Let me get out of here.
In modern private schools, and I should know, I attended one, it's not uncommon to see PragerU videos shown in class. It's not uncommon to see economics classes that espouse the suicidal free market ideology of Friedman and Rand. History classes portray the U.S. as the good guy in every conflict.
Every time somebody say that statement, I find it extremely cringy. Cringy to the point it sounds like you're starting up a small engine. Cringy, 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 cringy.
Including those where we were clearly in the wrong. Today's supposedly Christian education would not be recognized as such by the Jesus of the Bible. Instead, it's a new religion, the religion of free market conservatism. It shouldn't come as a surprise that those in power are doing their best to get more students enrolled in private school. Indoctrinating them into the cult of capitalism while they're young is the only way they can produce more pro-corporate voters. Heck, judging by what we've seen recently, it wouldn't come as a surprise to see public schools go the same way. The previous administration even suggested the creation of a commission for patriotic education, a slate of
Wait a minute, I missed that one. Patriotic education. Oh, never mind. I just read it. It's in the 1776. Yeah, I do remember that. I thought that was ridiculous too. Yeah.
pro-America, capitalist, imperialist propaganda. This disturbing trend towards privatization and capitalist indoctrination
Sounds a little bit like Korea, doesn't it?
aside, what's perhaps the big
North Korea.
bigger problem with American education is the fact that the entire system is simply outdated. Remember the
Yeah,
Massachusetts School
extremely.
Board? The one established in 1837? Well, that's when the standards for education were established. The stated goal was to educate young people. But if you take a look at how school was and is structured, it becomes more clear what education was actually for. Like it is today, the school day was strictly regimented. Teachers expected absolute obedience. The bell
Yep.
instructed students when the day began and ended. And
Yep.
punishment was doled out for any perceived non-compliance.
Yep.
If the students retained some basic arithmetic, great. But the real goal was to produce obedient, servile workers for the factories of the Industrial Revolution.
Exactly. They teach you how to be a good worker. They don't teach you how to use money responsibly. Like, what I mean by that is the percentage on your credit card. How to use that to build better credit. Like, don't go over 9%. Things like that. You know, pay it off on 30 days. Don't go over 9%. It's things like that that they don't teach you how money actually works. They teach you what you can do with it. They teach you how to get it by getting a good job and hoping that you don't lose that job. And if you can find another job, then that's just going to be what you're doing. Be job hunting. I ain't trying to be no jobber. That's why I started my own business. I just don't like other people's rules. I mean, there's going to be rules wherever you go, but dealing stuff like that. I used to be a factory worker. I worked in a plastic factory. I tore up both of my rotator cuffs. More so this one. But both of them got back problems. Not major back problems. I'm lucky for that one. But I got back pain from all the other labor-intensive jobs that I had. But, yeah. They definitely don't train you to be anything but a worker.
Step onto a factory floor and what's expected? Obedience, focus, the ability to follow instructions for hours on end. The day even began and ended with a bell. School was then and remains today an instrument to
Same
instill
damn
discipline, to mass produce agreeable little cogs for the industrial machine. The standardization of schooling ensured these cogs were nice and uniform, easily replaceable and expendable.
Damn, where they got these kids in a... Damn, what is she, in a loom or something? It look like she is in a loom. Oh, yeah.
Today, nearly 2 centuries later, factory labor is no longer the prime driver of the economy. Companies still need workers, but they demand a new set of skills. Young people entering the workforce are expected to be able to be flexible, creative, and on call at unreasonable hours. Even from a capitalist perspective, modern-day schooling does not adequately prepare our students for the real world. Of course, preparing students for a lifetime of servitude should not be the goal of a good education. Let's examine the main issues in regards to outdatedness. Which of these two hypothetical classes sounds more applicable to real life? Latin or home economics? Guess which one is more commonly taught. If the goal
Home
of school is to
economics.
prepare kids for the real world as we're meant to believe, we are doing our students a great
They teach
disservice.
you home
Why
ec.
don't we teach home economics classes? Why don't we teach high schoolers how to file taxes? What about useful things like basic first aid? We simply don't teach applicable skills. Then there's the
This
fact
is
that
true.
school curriculum just hasn't kept pace with advancements in modern technology. Basic computer classes are offered as electives, if at all. Even less common are video production, digital art, coding, web design.
I actually did take a photography class when I was in school. And I actually did have a home ec class when I was in school. But they quickly did away with those classes later on after I graduated. Because when my son got into school, I was like, damn, where's that class at? They don't do that no more? They don't even use cursive no more. We had to know all of that.
Design, 3D modeling, and countless other modern skills. We're letting students down when we don't acquaint them with modern tools. As a personal anecdote, I have a younger sister
You
who's
gotta do
shown a
it on your
proclivity for
own.
drawing. Her school's
Yeah,
art
just gotta do it
class,
on their
while
own
led
now.
by a good teacher, doesn't even mention new digital techniques. Since I work creatively for a living, I took the liberty.
I always hated art class in school. Because they always wanted us to draw stupid stuff like still life. I don't want to draw that little corny ass block standing up with a ball on top of it and hit the shadows. I understand what you're doing, but I've been doing this I do this on my own. These teachers out here just was in it for the paycheck, I guess. I don't know. Or they just didn't know that some of the students was advanced more than what they was teaching. Or we did that the last 3 years in a row.
Of teaching her a bit about digital art and apps like Procreate. Her skills have improved more in the last 2 months than in the previous 2 years. And I'm no artist. I just told her about the app and suggested she
Got
watch some
good
YouTube
skills with
videos.
blending.
Imagine if public schools had the funding for even a handful of art tablets or iPads. Kids could come out of middle school with skills they could translate into a rewarding career or hobby by the time they graduated from high school or college. Okay, so what are some solutions we could pursue? It's all well and good to say teach better classes, but that only addresses part of the problem. The root cause of many of the issues our education system faces is that we simply don't have an incentive to teach our students. As with anything in America, if there's no financial incentive, nothing will change. The profit motive is the bottom line. Private schools have an incentive to at least prepare students for standardized testing, so that their parents will be happy and keep paying tens of thousands of dollars per year for tuition. But
Show
that
me the money.
education comes packaged with truly damaging ideology, so making private schools more accessible would not be a long-term solution, as those students would go on to pass even more ludicrous free market education reforms. Vocational schools are an option if we truly
that's what
believe
they
the
know.
only purpose of education should be to prepare students for the job market.
I went to a vocational school. I took auto mechanics. I actually went to college afterwards to become a master mechanic. I didn't stay because my first son was born, and gotta change things up when you got major happenings like that. And then, after that came the fire life. And then after that was the chef run. So now I'm back to artist, because now I'm doing this on my own.
There's a lot to be said for picking a trade and excelling in it. Electricians, welders, AC technicians, these are
Yep.
all critical roles in our society.
They taught all
One
of
problem
those
with
in
vocational
school where I went.
schools is that they typically come with a tuition, which can be a difficult burden for many families. Homeschooling is another option, though in the US, it often carries a similar connotation to private schools. Many
Yeah.
homeschooled children come from very religious backgrounds and are kept
No.
separate from other kids their age, which
I have a very religious background, but I'm not. That's the family. I'm on a different wavelength. Not atheist, but not Christian and all that stuff either.
can lead to serious developmental issues. That being said, there are plenty of homeschooling programs that include on-location learning, such as in museums or on community college campuses. This offers a
good
more
way.
diverse, hands-on experience for students and can provide an excellent learning environment depending on the child.
Very excellent learning experience because they get to actually see and touch, and things are tangible.
Now, that right there is something we don't discuss enough in the US. Appropriate education depends on the child. We don't all learn the same way. Some students learn
Exactly.
more quickly than others. Some
Yep.
require hands-on experience. Some learn
Yep.
simply by watching or listening. By creating one single, standardized educational template, we're trying to standardize a whole spectrum of humanity, and that just doesn't work. There are some types of education, such as those found in Montessori schools, that try to foster a more diverse learning environment, allowing students to learn at different paces and having students who grasp subjects more quickly work with those who are struggling. This allows more room for personal growth, but also fosters empathy and interpersonal skills. The jury is still out on whether Montessori schools are strictly better than more traditional education, but some studies seem to say pretty conclusively that their students fare better than those in standard schools. Overall, the moral of the story is that, like always, privatization is harming the majority in the
You hear that a lot too. School districts running out of cash.
pursuit of ever greater profits. The defunding of public schools has caused our country to slip further and further behind our peer nations. Our inability to keep up with the times has produced students who are woefully under-equipped to compete with students from other countries. Even from a capitalist perspective, it should be clear that our education system isn't working. And maybe that's the point. Maybe for the ruling class, it's desirable for the average American student to fail, so that they're forced to take the lower-paying jobs that generate huge profits for their executives. Whether
Or you end up in jail, still having to work and still being a cash crop. Because they make money off of you being in jail too.
Whether that's the case or not, I think it's safe to say that
Or
we cannot
prison.
expect the federal government to solve the problem. For at
Nope.
least the past 40 years, they've been completely controlled by massive corporations, and will continue to trend towards suicidal free market non-solutions. Instead, I would
Because they don't get it. They don't care and they don't get it. And they too damn old. Get their old asses out of there. We need some new blood in there.
suggest that education on the community level could be a worthwhile endeavor. If we expanded the idea of homeschooling to include other members of your community, we could create localized educational templates that not only allowed for more individualized expression, but also catered towards the needs and unique perspectives of each community. Local experts could teach small classes in their respective fields. Students could learn the history of their town, city, or region. Parents could build a network of trust where they could all help supervise or teach each other's children, which in turn would strengthen the community, fostering cooperation, friendship, and empathy. These communities...
Is that teacher the bus driver as well? I thought, didn't she the same person that was the bus driver? I have to check that out when I edit this video. Like, was she the same person? I think they just got a group of actors and they just switched.
Could engage in sort of small-scale exchange programs, day or week-long trips where students could experience the realities of different communities, which would provide
I know it's funky in there.
them with worldly experience and a refreshing change of pace. We tend to get stuck in the notion that what we have now is the only possibility, whether that's in regards to healthcare, entire economic systems, or education. There are so many improvements we could make, so many possibilities worth exploring, and few are more important than how we teach the next generation. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more like it, consider subscribing.
Yeah, hit Second Thought up with a sub if you haven't already. You know, check out some of their videos. Give them some watch time. You know, that always helps, you know. There's enough pie for everybody to get something. Yeah, that was a decent video. Oh, yeah. It kind of, like, said stuff I pretty much already thought. So it wasn't, like, really, like, groundbreaking. But, speaking of America's prisons, I found another Second Thought video on America's prisons and why they are the worst in the world. So we're going to get back on the comparison tip. I just thought this little education thing would be a nice little, you know, Sunday, take it easy. We're going to get back to the heavy hitting. I think that prison one's going to be a doozy because I used to work in the jails too. I used to be a supervisor in the kitchen. I was in charge of making sure the inmates, because I had a crew of a dozen inmates, I had to make sure that they were cooking the food right, or I had to make sure they knew how to cook the food right, because I had to train them. So I'm down there training people who aren't cooks to be cooks, who are waiting to go to prison. It was weird, yeah. I wouldn't do that again, but it was weird. All right. If you haven't liked and subscribed to the channel and got in on the conversations, check things out. See if there's some other videos on the playlist that you want to look at. Let me know what you do want to look at. You know, you got some videos. We looking around different countries and stuff. You know, we do a little comparison, see what's bouncing around in America. And we go and see what's in... So far, we've done Canada. You know, Canada, what do they think of Americans? You know, if you got a country out there, you watching the videos, and you want to say something, hey, what's, I don't know, what's the country that you don't hear too much about? What do Mongolians think about Americans? You know, something like that. But I ain't going to hold y'all too much longer. I am Aquarian OG, and I am damn hungry, so I am O-U-T. Deuces on the flips, y'all. Hey, 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 hey.